1797. When we finished the last tape, you were telling us about how you avoided going past the Nazi headquarters. Would you tell us about that? Tell us some more about that.
Well, that was just a precaution.
And why did you feel you had to take precautions?
Because, the anti-Semitic atmosphere was everywhere, especially because we were living in Nuremberg, which was really the hotbed of Nazism. We had the conventions there. We had a man called Streicher who published a newspaper called the Stürmer, which was all anti-Jewish. It had terrible caricatures of Jewish faces and mentioned names and so on. And those pictures were plastered all over the place. So, you had to know what to avoid. The kids would pick up that from their parents, of course, and we had to be careful on the way home from school or on the way to school, because they would run and yell anti-Jewish things like Judenstinker, which means stinking Jew. Some of them would throw rocks. It was a difficult thing, and one reason my mother let me use my bike was that we could get out of the way faster, and so I was allowed to take my bicycle to school. That was already when I was going into the Jewish school, which was fairly far away for a small town. And one incident that I remember very well was at one point I must have fallen off the bike and lay there, and a couple of people gathered around, and one guy said, let the Jew lie there. Somebody else came and helped get me up, and I had hurt my knee, so I had to just walk my bicycle home from there. But that's one that really did stick in my mind. And
how would they know that you were Jewish?
They knew from looking at you. They all knew. It was before they had the stars, before we had the yellow stars. We were gone by then, fortunately, but they all knew. They always knew.
Do you remember any other incidents?
I also think, coming back to this, when we went to school, we had religious instruction in school. And the other kids knew who went to the Jewish.
This is when you were in the Lyceum and
yeah, earlier than that. All right, sorry.
In the Jewish school, as you think back, who controlled the curriculum? Did the Nazis control the curriculum, or do you think Jewish schools free to teach what they wanted?
I would think that, from what I remember of the Jewish public school, it was then a Jewish school, the director was a very powerful man, and he had very good standing in the Jewish community. I think probably also originally in the community as a whole. I think he probably regulated the curriculum.
Were you ever subjected to lessons in the Nazi race science?
To what?
The Nazi race science. When the Nazis took over the state schools, they had lessons in race science.
No.
You didn't have to take that.
I think I left the public schools early enough that I didn't have that.
Did you ever read the Stürmer?
I don't remember. I think, we weren't, my parents wouldn't let me bring it into the house. But I think we saw in the school that we saw parts of it. I'm not sure that I ever read the whole thing.
Were you still able at that point to go to theaters and movie theaters and opera or other public events?
Mm-hmm.
And did you?
Mm-hmm. Went to the movies, went to the opera.
Was there any special seating?
No.
Or you just... Would you tell us about an occasion when you went to the opera to see the Meistersinger?
Yes, that was a little daring, I think, but a small number of our friends got tickets way up high, while the Führer was way down low, but we were in the same theater at the same time.
What do you remember of how the audience reacted to him?
I don't remember much. I think he got applause. I don't remember the details.
And how did you feel?
I met somebody the other day who was also there that, it was very strange. But, Nuremberg was the Nazi city, and then at the same time Richard Wagner had written about it and composed about it, so that it was a natural for Hitler to be there. And we liked Wagner.
And what did you think when you saw Hitler?
I was a little scared, I think. I think I could sort of, I was high enough up I could spit on him, but I didn't.
What were you thinking? I mean, you were a young girl, and what did you think was going to happen in Germany?
I don't know that I gave it a lot of thought. I was a Zionist. I thought if we ever had to leave, I would go to Palestine. My parents were talking about going to Africa and then America. I think I assumed that eventually we would go, and it was exciting. And my friends were starting to leave. Yeah, one would go, and 6 months later another one would go. And so it was, in a way, the normal thing for people to do.
Well, let's talk now about when the time came for you to leave. Was there any incident in particular that caused your mother to say, this is the time?
Well, that incident with the secret police, after they picked up. She always started much earlier, thinking that this would come to no good, and she started working on my father, who said he didn't think he wanted to, it was necessary to go. And as things got worse, she finally convinced him that it was time to go. And then we found out that we couldn't get into South Africa.
And why was that?
Because the South Africans closed the doors on the Jews, which I think they might have been sorry about later, because they might have had a better distribution of whites than they have now. But anyway, they wouldn't let them in. And so we turned to my uncle here in New York, and he provided the affidavit for the three of us to come. It wasn't easy for him because it was depression here, and he was working 2 jobs just trying to make a living. At least he had one good job. I think when we came, he took another job just so that he could help us, because we came with practically no money.
There is one incident that I would like to go back to.
Okay.
The year before you left, of course, was the time of the Berlin Olympics.
Right.
Was there any lessening of restrictions on Jews at that time, when the idea that the world's eyes would be on Germany?
No, I don't think so.
What do you remember about the Olympics?
Well, Jews weren't allowed to go there, as far as I know. I remember that, I don't know how much of this I remember, but my aunt had a friend, and I had met these people, whose daughter was an Olympic quality sprinter who was supposed to enter the Olympics for Germany, and then in the last minute they told her she couldn't, because she was Jewish and she couldn't compete.
And what was her
Only
name?
pure Aryans could be doing that.
And what was her name?
Her name was Gretel Bergman, and she lived, her mother lived about 2 doors down from my aunt. I don't know that I ever actually met her. I think I did, but I certainly knew the family. So, and I remember that this year she actually was honored in Berlin last year, in the Berlin Olympics. She lives in the United States. Okay.
What was it like for you to leave everything that you knew? Were you excited or nervous?
Yeah, I think so. It was a combination. I was excited, something new was going to happen. There were plenty of reasons why I didn't want to stay in Germany. I couldn't see any future, which is what was my mother's opinion. I was frightened because although I'd had English in school, I didn't speak much. I didn't speak it at all. I'd learned some. Then once we knew we were leaving, I had a crash course. My mother hired an English woman to teach me. Didn't work out too well. She wasn't that good. I was worried about that. I didn't know what I would find in America. When I first thought about it, I thought it was probably going to be more primitive. And I talked to people and found it. My mother said no, we're a civilized country. So in a way, I was looking forward to something new. I hated to leave some of my friends, but some of them had left, and it was already that everybody felt that was part of the way things were. So I was reasonably well prepared. My mother took me shopping. We bought a lot of clothes. That was nice, we went to Czechoslovakia because my mother wanted to meet her brother, make sure that things were going all right, and that was nice. So there were a lot of positive things about getting ready. We'd had to move because our building where we lived was scheduled to be torn down. So for the last, I think 3 or 4 months, we had to move to another apartment. We had to get rid of a lot of furniture. And, but it was all kind of exciting.
Were there any restrictions on how much money your parents could bring out of the country?
Yeah. I don't know exactly what they were at the time, but I know we arrived with very little money. My aunt, one of my mother's sisters, the oldest sister, whose home we'd been visiting a lot in Germany. She'd gone a year before to look in America. She first had gone to Africa and then to America. She was a widow, so she was free to travel. And she had spent a year with my uncle in New York. So she kept writing letters about what we should bring, what we shouldn't bring, what we could bring that could be sold and make money when we got here. So we had a lot of guidance, and every time a letter came from Aunt Betty, there were more directives about what we should do. It was, like I said, it was kind of exciting.
Do you recall bringing any special mementos with you?
I brought my photo album. I brought a diary that it was very incomplete, and a book that had farewell greetings from my friends. And I still have all those. So.
Where did you leave from in Germany?
Hamburg.
And how did you?
We took a boat, 10-day trip, on the SS Roosevelt, President Roosevelt. It was a long trip. The boats weren't very fast, and we went to Berlin for 2 weeks. My mother had a friend there, and because again it was in September, and we left Nuremberg because it was again the Nazi convention. But we didn't get a boat until about 2 weeks later, so we spent time in Berlin, which was very nice. Berlin was much more cosmopolitan, so it wasn't as overt as it was in Nuremberg. And we stayed with friends of my mother's. They showed us Berlin. Had a good time. Then we went on to Hamburg and got on the boat. And the boat trip was 10 days. And my parents got seasick, and I didn't. Not at the beginning, anyway. And my uncle was at the pier. We stopped at Ellis Island. Nobody went off. But my mother had gotten a letter from the German consul from the American consul in Stuttgart when we got our visa to come here. And she never knew what was in that letter. She was told to give it to the doctor on Ellis Island. And all the time she was worried about what it was all about. We never found out, but nothing happened. But it was a worry.
What were your first impressions of New York City?
Big. My uncle had an old car. It was old even for those days. And, one of these old boxy type cars. And there wasn't enough room in there for us. So he had taken a little stool and put it in the car. So I was sitting on the stool as we were driven to his house.
And where did he live?
He lived in Elmhurst. And my parents stayed with him. And I stayed with a sister of my uncle's wife. It was a couple of blocks away. And my aunt had already taken an apartment for all of us in Flushing. She and the three of us. It was a good-sized apartment. And my mother started doing alterations. Both of them, my mother and my aunt, did alterations. My father tried to find a job, which wasn't easy. So I said there weren't many jobs around, and he was not young anymore at that stage. And the only thing he finally found was being a porter in a hospital, sweeping floors and
what
whatever.
Hospital?
At first he went from Flushing into Lenox Hill because somebody knew somebody at Lenox Hill, so he got the job there. And then later we moved to Jackson Heights, and he got a job at the Physicians Hospital, which was in Jackson Heights, so that was easier for him. But he used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning or something to be on the job. We had to take subways, and by that time it must have been certainly beginning of his 60s. So.
Did either of your parents speak much English?
My mother spoke a fair amount of English. She'd gone to a school that was run by English women in Nuremberg. They both picked it up. My mother spoke better than my father, but they both picked it up.
And tell us about your experiences. What happened to you when you first arrived?
Well, I did nothing. I kept hoping nobody would bother me. But eventually my aunt and my uncle said, you have to go to school. I had not gone to school in Nuremberg anymore because I knew I was leaving, and I had finished the 8 years. And after that, if you didn't go to the Gymnasium Lyceum, you just had what was called continuation school that you were supposed to do for another couple of years. I'd never gone to that. So she came and she took me to Flushing High School. She was also originally German, and her English wasn't particularly good. But she took me there, they introduced me, and she left me.
And what was it like those first days?
That was scary.
Tell us about it. What do you remember?
There were some very nice people who, there was a woman who was a Jewish woman who was a German teacher. She started with translating for me, speaking German, speaking English with me, and from each class, the teacher would appoint some other student and say, now you take her there, and then you take her to the next one. I remember that very well. And I remember in English, this girl that took me, they must have said something about you have to do a book report or something, which I didn't understand. And she says, right, you know, because you have to know, you have to do this. And, it was difficult, but I learned English very fast.
Was that when you changed the spelling of your first name?
My aunt did. My aunt said that Margot was not an English name. I should change it to Margaret. I didn't care one way or the other. So that's when it actually became official when I got my citizenship papers. But like I said, I picked up the English very quickly.
Was it easy to make friends?
Yeah. I didn't have too much trouble. There was one other student who had come from Germany that I knew, a boy. Sometimes we would get together, and eventually you made friends. I don't think I made many, but I had some very nice. And she and one girl who's French, Catholic French, and apparently she had a couple of sisters, and maybe it was the parents who said, you know, she was very nice to me, and they invited me to their house and so on. So that was the beginning of some social activity. We were living in Flushing, which was out of the way from where most of the German Jews lived, which was up in Washington Heights. So whatever people I knew up there, I didn't get to see very often, but we did get together. And then, do you remember there was a Jewish Y on 110th Street in Central Park? There was a Hebrew Y. And they tried to do something for the young new arrivals. And they started a social group. Originally it was supposed to be mixed, Americans and the new arrivals. Eventually it became almost completely new arrivals. But a friend of mine took me there, and then that began really a very active social life. It was very nice, and I got a boyfriend right away, and things were in pretty good shape.
When you first got here, did you find that the American youngsters, what was the level of their awareness of what was going on outside the United States?
Not much. I don't think so.
Did they ever ask you about why you would come, show any curiosity?
I don't think so. I don't remember, really. I know that one of the women that my mother worked for got me to join some Jewish group in Flushing. I don't remember what it was. And I found that I wasn't particularly accepted. Now, these were Jewish girls. And I stopped going after a while.
Why didn't they accept you?
I don't know. I was strange. I was not like the others.
Were you still, did you still have family in Germany at that time?
Yes. I had aunt and uncle who were my father's sister. My father had two sisters in Stuttgart. One had a son in Australia, and she eventually left. The other aunt was the one I visited quite often, and she, her husband died, and we lost contact. We know that she died in Auschwitz. And one of my cousins, who was in Heilbronn still, my father's, he was also deported and died in Auschwitz. But we didn't know that at the time. We just knew that we lost contact.
And when did you lose contact?
I guess at the beginning of the war.
What was your reaction to, in September of '39, when Germany invaded Poland? Was that a time in which you lost contact with them?
I don't think so. It may have been. I'm not sure. The invasion of Poland was just one more of Hitler's grab of power.
About that time, there was beginning to be a lot of talk in the United States as to whether or not we should get involved in the war. What do you remember about that?
I remember that there was a lot of talk about it, and that the opinions were quite heated about one or the other. I guess we favored that they should go in, that the more force there was against Hitler, the better the chances of getting rid of him. I don't think we ever had a doubt that eventually we'd get rid of him.
That famous question that's always asked, and where were you on December 7th, 1941?
I was at one of these social gatherings with this group up at the Y, and when we got on the subway, we saw the headline.
And what did you think?
We said, now we'll have to go in. And that's what it was.
And what were you doing?
December 8th was my birthday, so I remember this well. I remember Roosevelt's speech very well on December 8th.
And what were you doing at that time? Were you still in school?
At that time, no, I had finished high school. I was working as a secretary. I'd gone to secretarial school for a couple of months. Didn't like it. I was working for a relative who was setting up a business. He had done metal smelting, metal work in Germany, and he found a couple of backers who supported him and provided money for him to set up a smelting factory, because they figured with the war that there would be plenty of work for him. And he wanted somebody in the office. There was before the days where everybody had all kinds of message centers and stuff like that. So I had this job, I had nothing to do. So I started going to school at night at Hunter College, and I did my homework. Unfortunately, what happened is that I think because this relative of mine was a German Jew, there were no defense businesses coming. I guess they didn't trust him or something. So it never took off. So I worked there, and then they finally closed it down. Then I got another job. But I was going to Hunter at the time, and the other job I got from somebody else was like a clerk in a business, and I was really just doing filing and checking invoices and things like that and it was a full-time job.
Thank you. We'll pause here to change.